everyone. My name is Srishti and I am a digital transformation consultant at Hyperbots. Today, I'm delighted to have Claudia Mejia as my guest. Thank you so much for taking out the time, Claudia.
Hi, Sri. Thank you to see you again.
Absolutely. It's an absolute pleasure to always have you here. And I love having these conversations with you. So, just a little bit about Claudia for the audience. She is the managing director at Ikigai Edge. And today, we'll be discussing on the topic payment terms rationalization across vendors. So, whenever that you're ready, Claudia, we can get started.
All right, let's go.
All right. To start off with, what is payment term rationalization and why is it important for businesses?
So basically, payments terms rationalization is the standardization and aligning payment conditions across vendors. We usually do this when we consolidate categories, and that way it's easier to standardize these practices. What it helps by doing that is that reduces complexity, helps improve cash flow forecasting, and ensures consistency. So at the end of the day, it's about financial efficiency and vendor relationships, and all these things help to do that.
Understood. Which payment terms can be rationalized amongst vendors in a similar class of purchases?
So there are a couple of things that can be rationalized. For example, the net days. Sometimes some companies go net 30, net 45. So depending of the category of the vendor, you can have some that are net 30, some net 45, or even net early payment discounts as well. You can have standards for example, 2% if it's paid before 10 days, and if not, net 30. Those are kind of examples of early discount. Late payments, penalties, it's important to set up those ones in the contracts as well. And I will say the payment methods. Depending on the payment methods, you can have some extra fees or not.
Understood. And going on to the next question, how can rationalizing payment terms benefit a company?
Well, ideally, we want to improve cash flow. So when we have consistency and standards with payment terms, we are able to plan better how we manage our cash. Operational efficiency, because now there is not so much complexity in the administration of payments. So that also helps how we manage our resources. Better vendor management, which enhance negotiations, and we can leverage the terms across our vendors as well. And at the end of the day, cost savings, right? We want to make sure that we are as efficient as possible with our cash management and how we direct our payments.
So, Claudia, can you help us understand what steps are involved in rationalizing payment terms across similar vendors?
So we usually start with collecting the data. So we group historical data from the vendors and the payment terms. We categorize them also based on the type of services or purchases that we do. Then we benchmark, we compare the terms against the industry standards and the best practices. And after that, we make sure that we communicate with the business units and the procurement team with collaboration with finance of the potential changes of the payment terms. And then we go and we negotiate with the vendors. Sometimes these negotiations can be fast enough when you have the data, you can compare them with other vendors. So some negotiations can be easier than others. There are certain limitations that can happen if you have contracts that are longer with certain terms. So it might be some extra work there, but at the end of the day, we want to make sure that it's always a good agreement for both sides. And at the end of the day, we implement the changes. There is a change management process to do this. We make sure that the contracts are updated and the internal systems as well have the new standardized terms. And finally, we monitor what happens. So we continuously review the performance and making sure that the vendors follow the new practices.
That is extremely helpful. Now, going on to the next question. What challenges might arise when standardizing payment terms and how can they be addressed?
Well, we might have vendor resistance, right? So if we have a vendor that has been with us for a long time and all of a sudden we want to change certain terms, they're going to be maybe a little bit resistance of the new changes. But as long as you provide the data why and the justification why we're doing it, communication is important. I will say that with the new contracts, you need to have a little bit of flexibility and discuss what can disrupt when you go from one term to the other one. So all those processes need to be taken into consideration before just go into negotiations with the vendors. So I will say to mitigate these issues, you just need to be flexible, you need to communicate correctly, and you need to collaborate every time with your vendors.
That's very interesting. What role does AI play in identifying rationalization opportunities for payment terms?
Well, AI can spot inconsistencies. So if we have a company with many vendors and we just haven't been standardized these processes, you can have many terms for the same type of services. So AI can gather that information and basically spot up the inconsistencies. And then we can benchmark it with the best practices and the industry standards. Ideally, also, AI predicts the impact. So when we can model what can happen if we change the terms and how that's going to impact our cash flow. So ideally, we can just start from the beginning, collecting the data, predicting what is happening in the cash flow, and recommend the actions for the future.
That's really helpful. And thank you for sharing your insights on that. Now, that brings me to the last question. Can you provide an example of how Hyperbots Payment AI Copilot has helped rationalize payment terms?
So it's pretty much what we talk about. Hyperbots AI will be able to take the data and spot up the discrepancies with the terms, with the discounting, and at the end of the day, we'll be able to provide the recommendations to say, okay, for this type of category compared with the benchmarks, instead of net 45, let's move it with net 30 with this type of discounting. And this type of recommendation allow us to be more efficient with our cash flow and be able to predict the future a little better. And also we will reduce the administrative complexity because when you have vendors within the same category that has terms all over the place, it's very difficult for the accounting and the finance teams to predict how the cash is going to come through and basically be very efficient about cash flow. So these are great benefits when you can automatize and then being able to gather the insights. Hyperbots does it and is very efficient with that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And with that, we have come to an end to today's discussions. Thank you for joining us, Claudia. It is always lovely to have you here. And also big thanks to our viewers. I'll see you around. Have a good one. Goodbye.